Chapter 213, The Tortures of Lady Ravensworth. Oh, okay. Where Lydia has promised to torture Adeline, Lady Ravensworth, for a year. A week had now elapsed since Lydia Hutchinson entered the service of Lady Ravensworth. The service. Oh, what a service was where the menial had become the mistress, and the mistress had descended to the menial. From the moment that Lydia had expressed her unalterable resolution to remain at the Hall, Lord Ravensworth scarcely ever quitted his private cabinet. He had a bed made up in an adjoining room, and secluded himself completely from his wife. Vainly did Adeline seek him, go upon her knees before him, and beseech him with the bitterest tears and the most fervent prayers to return to an active life. He contemplated her with an apathetic listlessness, as if he were verging, when put little past the prime of life, into second childhood. Or if he did manifest a scintillation of his former spirit, it was merely to command his wife to leave him to his own meditations. And again did he have recourse to the pipe. In fact, he was never easy now, save when he lulled his thoughts to complete stupefaction by means of the tobacco. Even when, in the midst of her earnest prayers, his wife implored him to come forth again into the world to live and find for the sake of his as yet unborn babe, the fire that kindled in his eyes was so evanescent that an acute observer could alone perceive the only momentary effect which the appeal procured. The guests had all taken their departure the day after the bridal, and the splendid mansion immediately became the scene of silence and woe. To all the entreaties of his wife, to all the representations of his favorite page Quentin, that he would engage eminent medical assistance, Lord Ravensworth would not hear, or rouse himself as to utter a stern refusal, accompanied with a command that he might be left alone. Thus he rapidly accomplished his own destruction, committing involuntary suicide by slow, certain, and yet unsuspected means, even as his brother, the Honorable Gilbert Vernon, had declared to the Resurrection Man. Adeline had no inclination to seek the bustle and excitement of society. Her love of display and ostentation was subdued, if not altogether crushed. She was so overwhelmed with sorrow, so goaded by the tyranny of Lydia Hutchinson, so desperate by the mere fact of having to submit to that oppression, and by the consciousness that she dared not unbosom her cares to a single sympathizing heart, that she at times felt as if she were on the point of becoming raving mad, and at others as if she could lay herself down and die. We will afford the reader an idea of the mode of life which the once proud and haughty Lady Ravensworth was now compelled to lead beneath the crushing despotism of Lydia Hutchinson. It was on the 7th morning after the arrival of the latter at Ravensworth Hall. The clock had struck 9 when Lydia repaired to the apartment of her mistress. Until she reached the door, her manner was meek and subdued, because she incurred a chance of meeting the other domestics in the passages and corridors. But the moment she entered Adeline's apartment, the moment the door of that chamber closed behind her, her manner suddenly changed. No longer meek, no longer subdued, no longer wearing the stamp of servitude, Lydia assumed a stern expression of countenance. So terrible and a vengeful woman, and in an instant clothed herself, as it were, with an appearance of truly fiend-like malignity. Adeline slept. Approaching the bed, Lydia shook her rudely. Lady Ravensworth awoke with a start, and then glanced hastily, almost frantically, around. "Ah, you here again," she murmured, shrinking from the look of bitter hatred which Lydia cast upon her. "Yes, I am here again," said the vindictive woman. "It is time for you to rise." "Oh, spare me, Lydia," exclaimed Madeline. "Allow me to repose a little longer. I have passed a wretched sleepless night. See, my pillow is still moist with tears of anguish which I have shed. And it was but an hour ago that I fell into an uneasy slumber. I cannot live thus. I would rather that you should take a dagger and plunge it into my heart at once. Oh, leave me to rest for only another hour." "No, it is time to rise, I say," cried Lydia. "It has been my destiny to pass many long, weary nights in the streets in the depths of winter, and with the icy wind penetrating through my scanty clothing, till it seemed to freeze the very marrow in my bones. I have been so wearied, so cold, so broken down for want of sleep, that I would have given 10 years of my life for 2 hours' repose in a warm and comfortable bed. But still I have often, in those times, passed a whole week without so resting my sinking frame. Think you, then, that I can now permit you the luxury of sleep when your body requires it, of repose when your mind needs it? No, Adeline, no, I cannot turn you forth into the streets to become a houseless wanderer, as I have been, but I can at least arouse you from the indolent enjoyment of that bed of down." With these words, Lydia seized Lady Ravensworth rudely by the wrist and compelled her to leave the couch. Then the revengeful woman seated herself in a chair and said in a harsh tone, "Light the fire, Adeline, I am cold." "No, I will not be your servant," exclaimed Lady Ravensworth. "You are mine, and it is for you to do those menial offices." Provoke me not, Adeline, said Lydia Hutchinson coolly, or I will repair straight to the servants' hall and there proclaim the astounding fact that Lord Ravensworth's relapse has been produced by the discovery of his wife's frailty ere their marriage. Oh, okay. In my brain, I had him switched. I thought Adeline was saying this to Lydia. Okay. So Lydia's like, don't make me mad or I will go tell everybody what you've been doing. What will become of me, murmured Adeline, wringing her hands. Are you a woman or are you a fiend? I am a woman, and one who, having suffered much, knows how to revenge deeply, returned Lydia. You shall obey me or I will cover you with shame. Adeline made no reply, but with scalding tears trickling down her cheeks, she proceeded, yes, she, the high-born peeress, to arrange the wood in the grate, to heap upon the coals, and to light the fire. And while she was kneeling in the performance of that menial task, while her delicate white hands were coming in contact with the black grate, and while she was shivering in her night gear, and her long disheveled hair streamed down her neck and bosom, there, within a few feet of her, sat the menial, the servant, comfortably placed in an armchair and calmly surveying the degrading occupation of her mistress. I have often, oh, how often longed for a stick of wood and a morsel of coal to make myself a fire, if no larger than sufficient to warm the palms of my utmost frost-bitten hands, said Lydia after a short pause. And when I have dragged my weary limbs past the house of the rich, and have caught sight of the cheerful flames blazing through the area windows of their kitchens, I have thought to myself, oh, for 1 hour to sit within the influence of that genial warmth. And yet you, the proud daughter of the aristocracy, recoil in disgust from a task which so many thousands of poor creatures would only be too glad to have an opportunity of performing. Adeline sobbed bitterly, but made no reply. The fire was now blazing in the grate. Still the high-born peeress was shivering with the cold, for ere she could put on a single article of clothing, she was forced to wash the black dirt from her delicate fingers. Then that lady, who until within a week had never even done so much as take with her own hands a change of linen from the cupboard or select a gown from the wardrobe, was compelled to perform those duties for herself, and all while her servant, her hired servant, to whom she had to pay high wages and afford food and lodging, that servant was seated in the armchair warming herself by the now cheerful fire. Do not be ashamed of your occupation, madam, said Lydia. It is fortunate for you that there is a well-stocked cupboard to select from, and a well-provided wardrobe to have recourse to. Your linen is the most delicate texture and of the most refined work. Your feet have never worn anything coarser than silk. For your gowns you may choose among 50 dresses. One would even think that your ladyship would be bewildered by the variety of assortment, and yet you are indignant at being compelled to take the trouble to make your selections. While Lydia Hutchins was thus venting her bitter sarcasm and her cutting reproach upon Lady Ravensworth, the latter was hurriedly accomplishing the routine of the toilette. She no longer took pride in her appearance. She scarcely glanced in the mirror as she combed out those tresses which it was Lydia's duty to have arranged. Her sole thought was to escape as speedily as possible from that room where insults and indignities were so profusely accumulated upon her. But her ordeal of torture was not yet at its end. As soon as Lady Ravensworth was dressed, Lydia Hutchinson said in a cool but authoritative tone, Adeline, you will comb out my hair for me now. Provoke me not, vile woman, provoke me not beyond the powers of endurance, almost shrieked the unhappy lady, or I shall be tempted, to lay violent hands upon you. What will become of me? I am prepared to stand the risk of any ebullition of fury on your part, said Lydia, in the same imperturbable manner in which she had before spoken. Lay but a finger upon me to do me an injury, and I will attack you. I will assault you. I will disfigure your countenance with my nails. I will tear out your hair by handfuls. I will beat your teeth from your mouth. For I am stronger than you, and you would gain nothing by an attempt to hurt me. Wow, she's turned out to be very angry. But I will not be your servant, cried Adeline, fire flashing from her eyes. I tended your ladyship when you lay upon the humble couch in my garret in the agonies of maternity, replied Lydia, and your ladyship shall now wait on me. No, said Adeline wildly, you denigrate me in my own estimation. You render me contemptible in my own eyes. And you have spurned and scorned me, interrupted Lydia. You have made me, too, the lowest, by using me as an instrument to save you from shame. And now it is time that I should teach you, the proud peeress, that I, the humble and friendless woman, have my feelings, which may be wounded as well as your own. Lydia, I beg you, I implore you, on my knees, I beseech you to have mercy on me, cried Adeline, clasping her hands together in a paroxysm of ineffable anguish, and falling at the feet of the stern and relentless woman whom she had wronged. I can know no mercy for you, said Lydia Hutchinson, now speaking in a deep and almost hoarse tone, which denoted the powerful concentration of her vengeful passions. When I think of all that I have suffered, when I trace my miseries to their source and remember how happy I might have been in the society of a fond father and a loving brother, when I reflect that it was you who led me astray and, having blighted all my prospects, demanded even the sacrifice of my good name to your interests, thrust me away from you with scorn, when I ponder all this, it is enough to drive me mad, and yet you ask for mercy. No, never. I cannot pity you, for I hate you. I abhor you. Do not talk so fearfully, Lydia, good Lydia, cried Adeline in a voice of despair, while she endeavored to take the hands of her servant, at whose feet she still knelt. Think not to move me with a show of kindness, said Lydia, drawing back her hands in a contemptuous manner. Your overtures of good treatment come too late. But I will make amends for the past. I will henceforth consider you as my sister, exclaimed Adeline, raising her eyes in an imploring manner toward the vengeful woman. I will do all I can to repair my former ingratitude. Only be forbearing with me, if not for my sake, at least for the sake of my unborn babe. Your maternal feelings have improved in quality of late, said Lydia with a scornful curl of the lip. For as you must well remember, your first babe was consigned to me to be concealed in a pond or thrust into some hole. You cared not how or where, so long as it was hidden from every eye. Of all the agonies which you make me endure, detestable woman, said Adeline, rising from her knees in a perfect fury of rage and despair, that perpetual recurrence to the past is the most intolerable of all. Tell me, do you want to kill me by a slow and lingering death, or do you wish to drive me mad? She repeated, her eyes rolling wildly and her delicate hands clenching as she screamed forth the word. That scene was really an awful one, a scene of which no powers of description can possibly do justice. The stern and flexible tyranny of Lydia Hutchinson forced Lady Ravensworth to pass through all the terrible ordeal of the most tearing and heartbreaking emotions. Did the miserable peeress endeavor to screen herself within the stronghold of a sullen silence? The words of Lydia Hutchinson would gradually fall upon her, one after the other, with an irritating power that at length goaded her to desperation. Did she meet accusation with retort and encounter reproach with upbraiding, the inveteracy of Lydia's torturing language wound her feelings up to such a pitch that it was no wonder she should ask with an agonizing scream whether the avenging woman sought to drive her mad. Or again, did she endeavor to move the heart of her hired servant by self-humiliation and passionate appeal? The coldness or the malignant triumph with which those manifestations were received awoke within her that proud and haughty spirit which was now so nearly subdued altogether. Do you wish to drive me mad? Lady Ravensworth had said. Then, when the accompanying paroxysm of feeling was past, she threw herself on a chair and burst into an agony of tears. But Lydia was not softened. She suffered Adeline to weep for a few minutes, and when the unhappy lady was exhausted, subdued, broken-spirited, the unrelenting torturess repeated her command, "You can now arrange my hair." Oh, bad as Adeline was at heart, selfish as she was by nature and by education, it would have moved anyone to have seen the imploring, beseeching look which through her tears she cast upon Lydia's countenance. "My hair," said Lydia imperatively. Then Lady Ravensworth rose and meekly and timidly began to perform that menial office for her own menial. "I never thought," observed Lydia, "while I was a wanderer and an outcast in the streets, as for instance on the occasion when I accosted you in the bitterness of my starving condition in St. James's Street, and when your lackeys thrust me back, your husband declaring that it was easy to see what I was, and your carriage dashing me upon the curbstone, little did I think then that the time would ever be when a peeress of England should dress my hair, and least of all that this peeress should be you. But when in your pride you spurned the worm, you knew not that the day would ever possibly come for that worm to raise its head and sting you. Think you that I value any particular arrangement which you can bestow upon my hair? Think you that I cannot even, were I still vain, adapt it more to my taste with my own hands? Yes, certainly I could, but I compel you to attend upon me thus. I constitute myself the mistress, and make you the menial when we are alone together, because it is the principal element of my vengeance. It degrades you, it renders you little in your own eyes, you who were once so great, so haughty, and so proud." In this strain did Lydia Hutchinson continue to speak while Lady Ravensworth arranged her hair, and each word that the vindictive woman uttered fell like a drop of molten lead upon the already lacerated heart of the unfortunate Adeline. At length the ordeal, that same ordeal which had characterized each morning since Lydia Hutchinson had become an inmate of Ravens Hall, was over, and Adeline was released from that horrible tyranny, but only for a short time. Oh, I don't like this arrangement at all. Like they said, Adeline has been terrible. 100%. I'm not going to argue that. And Lydia has been through awful things. Never argue that either. But this situation isn't helping Lydia heal at all. And it's certainly not undoing the damage that Adeline did. And I have a feeling it's just going to come to a head and be terrible. All right, we'll see you in the next chapter.